So in the November of 43, I was given a rail pass and sent up to the very north of Scotland and joined an LCT, a landing craft tank. And it was one of probably 15, 20 maybe in a flotilla under the command of a more senior officer. They're all young chaps commanding them and manning them, and I was number one, second in command of this LCT. And my captain was only 3 months older than me. He had one ring and I had Michelin tabs. The interesting thing about this particular area where we were training, and we were training with the army, is the beaches. We were training to run up the beach, lower the ramp, get the troops off, pull up the ramp and back away. We must have done that hundreds of times to get into the rhythm of it. I'll tell you all about the detail of it later. When we got to France to do the real thing, the beach gradients were absolutely identical. So at the end of 43, we were training on beaches that somebody had reconnoitred the beaches in Normandy. It's worth thinking about. A lot of planning already beginning for the invasion. And of course, you join a landing craft and you train and you know jolly well you're going to have an invasion. Anyway, we stayed up there right through the winter of 43, training. Eventually we got posted, we got orders to move the whole flotilla of 25 odd craft down to Portsmouth. It was easy for us because it was follow my leader. We didn't really have to bother too much about the navigation of the ship. Okay, if you're solo, you'd have to properly navigate. Down there were minefields down the east coast. But with a senior officer leading us, we just got in behind them and crawled our way down to Portsmouth. Probably arriving in April, May, beginning of May, full of ships by then. Absolutely chock-a-block with all sorts of ships, from big landing craft to transport ships to navy. All the navy was accumulating there. And we knew a job was coming up, but we didn't know when. In Portsmouth, it was a gathering of many nations. The Brits, of course, Americans, of course, but you had Polish guys, Free French who were over from their navy. International gathering of services. We had little to do, keep the ship tidy, didn't get leave, couldn't leave the ship. You could get ashore, but you couldn't go on leave. And we lay out at anchor, 4 or 5 abreast, so we could visit other officers and get pally with fellow officers and visit their wardroom and have a quick nifty gin and tonic or something. But there was only, you see, a landing craft this size, about 3,000 ton. They were paper thin, made just for the job. You live pretty well. We had a little wardroom for 2 separate cabins. We had 5 crew who berthed together. And of course there was a strong sense of camaraderie about it all. Towards the end of May, the orders came through that we had to prepare for loading, and we were destined to take 10 Sherman tanks. The shore along from the Gosport side of Portsmouth, the Stokes Bay it's called, and round into Southampton Water and then round through to Calshot, had been designated loading area, and all along the beaches had been placed concrete ramps, and there's some of them still there. And we were told to proceed to a particular one, which we did. We beached, put the ramp down. Details about the ramp in a minute. 10 tanks came aboard with their crews, and that would have been about 29th, 30th of May, 3 or 4 days before the original scheduled date of the 4th of June. That was the original date of the landing, the planned landing. But by the 2nd or 3rd of June, the winds got up quite high, and everything was put on hold for 48 hours. So we were lumbered with not only 10 tanks, but we each had 5 crew on, so we had to feed them too. But that was all right. Everything was cheery. So we finish up, loaded and ready to go. We're back in the Solent where we had lain before, with 3 or 4 or 5 of us all along. Things happened then. 6th of June, we left Portsmouth as a flotilla of 25 landing craft, all with tanks, probably about 9 o'clock in the evening of the 5th. Now, during the 24 hours before the actual planned landing on the 6th, the mine sweepers had been out sweeping safe passages and buoying them, putting buoys out to marker buoys. So it was simply a question of keeping within those lines. And we chugged through the night. By dawn of the 6th, we were not far off, about a mile and a half off the shore. We were due to put our tanks ashore about 7:30 in the morning, when the tide was nearly high. This is where the chaos started, really. You have to admit, you had to find your own slot on the beach. You had to get your tanks off, had to pull off and get away, so another landing craft would come in its place. And when you think that probably along the English section of the French coast, you had 3 beaches designated sword, June of gold. I don't know why but they had the Brits were going in on the 2 wings of the beachhead, and the Canadians were coming down the middle. It didn't quite work out like that. I mean, fine on paper, but when you got a few shells flying around and ships getting damaged, we put our tanks ashore, but it was touch and go at times. Touch and go from the point of view that were you in the right spot, making sure that the tanks were put where they were supposed to go, but we managed it. My job at this very crucial time, which we trained for up in the north of Scotland, was first of all, as the landing craft reached the beach, or approached the beach, I should say, we dropped an anchor over the stern, a kedge anchor as it's called. After supervising, that had to be done quite carefully and precisely. I would go forward and supervise the lowering of the ramp. Now, the lowering of the ramp was equally critical, because if you lowered it if you lowered it too soon, as your craft approached the beach, it would dig in, if you follow me, and stop you dead. If you left it too late, it would come down on the beach and there'd be a huge gap between the outer edge of the ramp and the beach itself. And this is what we trained to do, and we did it absolutely perfectly. Everything went fine. Tanks went off, said cheerio to these guys, and off they went inland. Quite frankly, I think we were lucky. We, the Brits, were lucky in that there was not a lot of real opposition from the Germans, unlike the Americans, who really took a hammering from the Germans where they landed, but for different reasons. So our tanks disappeared, and we reversed the procedure. I would be forward supervising the raising of the ramp, and then have to go aft, supervise hauling in the kedge, which helped to pull you off the beach. I'd lifted the ramp up fine. I'd gone aft. Kipper was going astern on his engines. At the same time, I was heaving in on the kedge. At that moment, things happened. We had what I've always believed was a random mortar bomb that had been just tossed over the heads from inland, over the heads of the people on the beach, and it happened to hit us. It landed where the tanks had been, the so-called tank deck. Nobody was hurt, but it blew a hole, and I've said earlier, these craft were paper thin, and we just settled on the bottom. Didn't sink because we were still literally on the beach, but the water bubbled up a little bit. But now there was something like 6,000 craft in this invasion of all sorts, from the big capital ships down to the small landing craft that just take the infantry. American, British, French, Free French, Polish there were, and every ship in that armada, shall we call it, had precise instructions, contingency plans, if something should happen, that you cannot get away, you're sunk or hit or damaged or whatever. And that applied to us. And what we did was, following the instructions, we notified salvage. Salvage ships were floating around all over the place, and they said, well, leave it to us. Told the captain, get your crew off the ship and report to a senior naval officer called Principal Beachmaster, PBO. Principal Beachmaster. He had established a little sort of compound on the beach. He was really the beach policeman supervising the traffic, because it was deadly important to get the traffic off the beach, so that new stuff could come in. And we reported to him. We obviously weren't the first. Anyway, he said to my skipper, look, see that LCT landing craft tank taking off just now? Go and get a lift home on her. Skipper took his 5 crew off and off. And he turned to me and said, I can use you for a couple of hours. And for a couple of hours, I became his runner. Now, one is asked, what was happening all around you? And to tell you the truth, to this day, I cannot honestly remember what happened, except I know exactly what I did. But were there bullets flying over? Were there bombs falling? Were there people being hurt, killed? I don't remember that at all. As far as I'm concerned, he would say to me, look, you see that mix-up down the line, down the beach? And what would happen probably was one of the transporters could come off and sunk in the sand, because it was quite softy sand, got stuck. And I'd go down and find the officer in charge, and he would say, bugger off, pardon me, I'm looking after it. And you go back to tell the PBO it's all been fixed. Anyway, it was interesting, because I can now tell you that I was on the beach at D-Day for about 2 hours. After a couple of hours, he said, look, thanks for your help. Off you go. There's another one. I was back in Portsmouth at 6 o'clock that evening. That was my D-Day. End of story.